It was my dream to put an end to slavery and to reunite America after this bloody war. But the country is so full of hatred, and my enemies are everywhere. The country waits with bated breath as the hunt for my assassin draws to a close.
I will not come out this evening!
A poor consolation for my family who have followed me on this difficult path. The punishment for this crime must be severe. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. After grief and anger, hope must prevail and lead our country into a better future. Freedom for all men. I pray that my country will make this dream a reality.
April 14th, 1865. Ford Theatre in Washington is in shock. During the performance, a man fired at President Lincoln. The assassin is on the run. John Wilkes Booth is a fanatic Southerner and renowned actor who staged his crime like a Shakespeare play.
Bleeding. See what it's like. Okay, I'll feel it. Now hold that light right down there.
Excuse me, gentlemen. Excuse me.
In a house across the street from the theatre, doctors struggle to save the president's life.
Behind the ear, I don't see the bullet lines there.
Their only hope, to find and remove the bullet lodged in Lincoln's brain.
This is not looking good at all. Yeah, keep that light right there. That's good. Leave the bullet back there.
With each passing moment, their battle grows more and more desperate.
Right behind the lobe.
I feel something, Doctor, but it's so deep I don't know if it's safe to try to take
Then
it
the
out.
plot thickens. Lincoln's Secretary of State has also been targeted.
Seems there's also been an attempt on Mr. Seward.
Booth's evil plan seems to have succeeded. Who is this man whose hatred of the president has driven him to such violence? And why now, when the Civil War is already over? For months, John Wilkes Booth has been stalking the president, waiting for the perfect opportunity. He and his conspirators have been meeting secretly to come up with a plan. They are a wretched group, having lost everything during the Civil War. Among them are Lewis Powell, George Atzerodt, and a woman, Mary Surratt, who has given them a hiding place.
Our country owed all our troubles to him, and God simply made me the instrument of his punishment. Lincoln is a false moralist. He doesn't care about the niggers at all. He may speak of freedom, but he really wants to liberate all the slaves to destroy the South.
Booth has been stalking Lincoln for years. When the South loses the war, he finally cracks.
Booth.
He sees himself as Shakespeare's Brutus, destined to overthrow the tyrannical Caesar. It's a role he's often performed on stage. As the night wears on, the president's doctors begin to lose hope.
That's not good.
If we can't stop that bleeding, I don't know that there's anything we can do for him.
How's that pulse, Doctor?
It continues to grow weaker, Doctor.
Very shallow breathing. I'm worried about him.
Lincoln's wife Mary had been sitting beside him when Booth opened fire. It's a traumatic experience from which she will never recover.
Mr. Lincoln, please, Mr. Lincoln.
Mary.
No.
Though Lincoln's doctors know that he is dying, they say nothing to Mary for fear that she will break down. Lincoln's cabinet, along with his generals, gather at his bedside. They are all stunned. Why now, in the president's hour of triumph? After he has led the North to victory, after he has salvaged the Union, he has survived numerous assassination attempts. The man with the top hat is loved by his people. Fate was once on his side. People say that he is a man of 9 lives, but this is to be his last.
I shall live till my work is done, and no earthly power can prevent it.
On the outskirts of the capital, John Wilkes Booth joins up with an accomplice. Booth was able to pass unnoticed through the military blockades. Now he hopes to go into hiding in the south. Booth has planned his escape down to the last detail. Just a few days earlier, he had stowed rifles in a secret hiding place. The one thing he didn't plan for was that he would break his leg while jumping from Lincoln's box to the stage below. Now, riding across the Maryland countryside, he is in agonizing pain. It's a 10-mile journey to the home of a Southern sympathizer by the name of Dr. Samuel Mudd. Lincoln's war minister has dispatched a detachment of troops to pursue the assassin. Witnesses recognize the actor immediately, and it is assumed he will hide out in Virginia. Booth was introduced to Dr. Mudd during the war. The doctor senses that the two companions are up to something, but decides not to inquire further.
All right. I know it's not going to be easy. I'm sure you help the boys with it.
Give me something.
Here.
Oh.
Just bite down on that. Can he ride with that?
I wouldn't suggest it. I'd suggest a wagon. But if you don't have one, my father-in-law.
Horses. We must ride. Hole! Watch it, there's a hole!
Early morning, April 15th, 1865. The president who changed history, who reunited the nation, never regains consciousness. At 7:22 a.m., the president draws his last breath. In keeping with custom, coins are placed on his eyes so that he can pay the ferryman who, after 56 years of life, will bring him into the next world. News of Lincoln's death spreads like wildfire. Thousands come to the Capitol in Washington, where flags fly at half-mast. Newspapers publish special editions. Victory celebrations in Washington are called off. Shock and disbelief are everywhere. The captain brought the ship into the port safely. Someone cries into the crowd, and now he himself is lying dead on deck. Even Wall Street closes to mourn the president's death. 6 months before, he had been re-elected as president. With the war over, he had hoped to reunite the country, but his moment of triumph was all too brief. The White House has become a dark house. Mary Lincoln has faced much grief. First the loss of 2 sons, and now her beloved husband. 12-year-old Tad Lincoln is largely left to deal with his grief alone. Lincoln had always been a loving father. With his wife, he had endured the depths of despair when their sons Eddie and Willie died of typhoid fever. Mary had never quite recovered from their tragic deaths. She remembers how only 24 hours earlier, they had looked forward to watching a comedy at Ford's Theatre, starring the famous actress Laura Key.
Interesting. I never knew what they meant before.
Mary and Abe together. For a moment, they were finally happy. But it was not to last.
What a great performance. Finally, I could take revenge for the disgrace of the South, and my audience was stunned.
Well, surely a villain of coil stability would have destroyed the note. It would have been the very essence of... Oh my God! Mr. Lincoln! Mr. Lincoln! Mr. Lincoln, please! Help me! Help! Mr. Lincoln!
Sick! Step back, Tyrannus!
The public craves the latest news about the assassination. The papers are all too happy to oblige. Reporters interview eyewitnesses and describe the tragedy in all its detail. Shakespeare himself could hardly have written a better drama. A detachment of soldiers from the 13th New York Cavalry arrive in the small town of Bryantown in search of the assassin. Believing that Booth is still in Maryland, they begin to question the locals. While out buying groceries, Dr. Mudd learns that the president is dead and that soldiers are looking for his assassin.
Listen, if I knew where he was, believe me, y'all would be the first people I would tell.
John Wilkes Booth, you better tell us if you see him.
I have not.
Only one man in town knows about the fugitives. When he returns home, he discovers that they have gone. Booth had told him nothing about their escape route, only that they were bound for Virginia.
I walked with a firm step through 1,000 of his friends. I shouted Sic Semper Tyrannis, the same to all tyrants after I fired. I can never repent it, though we hated to kill.
For Booth, freedom lies in Virginia. He is certain that Southerners will understand his act and admire him for it. After his death, Lincoln's body is brought back to the White House. The bullet was lodged deep inside his head, behind his left eye socket. As president, Lincoln had wanted to build a modern America, where his countrymen could have the same opportunities he had. This was his vision for the country, and this is why the brutal war took place.
Until every drop of blood drawn by the lash shall be repaid by another.
An America that could finally cast off the shackles of slavery. The price of this struggle, more than 600,000 dead. He had been forced to go to war to prevent the secession of the South. His victory offered no sense of triumph. His final photo, taken soon after the South's surrender, just days before his assassination. On April 19th, a funeral service is held at the White House. Afterwards, 100,000 people, escort the coffin to the Capitol. Most blame Southern conspirators for the assassination. Some even fear that the South will now attack the North again. Their Abe has become a martyr, giving his life for his great dream. Mary Lincoln does not attend the funeral service. She shuts herself away for days in the private quarters of the White House. Ford Theatre is adorned with black ribbons as a sign of mourning. It has remained closed since the assassination. An actor finds the president's walking stick. Relics such as this are sold at a high price. Outside Washington, the assassin's pursuers are hot on his trail, though they don't yet realize it. For 3 days, Booth and his accomplice have been hiding by the Potomac River.
Think they're coming?
Just tend to the horses. Our chance will be in Virginia.
The soldiers plan to intercept the fugitives on their way to Virginia.
What idiots! They write that Lincoln's assassination was the toughest blow the South ever had to bear. How can they write that? Lincoln was our enemy. I only did it for the sake of our country.
You want some?
No.
You sure there's enough for two?
No.
Booth had not expected the South to mourn for Lincoln or to condemn him for his act. He himself had witnessed the growing hatred for Lincoln, the nigger president, in the South, where he, like most, believed that runaway slaves should be punished severely. Towards the end of the war, Booth, though a famous actor, had hardly performed in any plays. He could no longer cope with the world and drank too much. Booth had lost everything when an oil company he invested in went bankrupt. For that, like so much else, he blamed Lincoln, since the company was based in the North. When Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, fell on April 3, 1865, Booth nearly wept in anger. Liberated slaves cheered for the president. The South had surrendered. Sons of once proud plantation owners returned home from war, as did Booth. Together they were the defeated, failures facing a new and uncertain era. All over the country, wanted posters are being put up. The reward for the capture of John Wilkes Booth, $50,000, the largest sum ever to be offered for the apprehension of a murderer.
I do not care what becomes of me. I have no desire to outlive my country. I have started writing a diary to gather my thoughts, or I'll go insane. Why do they chase me like a runaway slave? I am not a common criminal. All I want is justice for this country.
Several times the pursuers closed in on their prey, but Booth and his accomplice David Herold proved elusive. Back in Washington, however, their co-conspirators have not managed to evade the long arm of the law. They have already been arrested and imprisoned. Mary Surratt and the others have hoods pulled over their heads to shut them off from their fellow inmates. It is hoped that their suffering will make them more willing to testify. The newspapers denounce the attractive 43-year-old widow as a witch, who managed to seduce young men and incite them to assassinate the president. The jail on the grounds of the Navy Yard is under direct control of the military. Photographer Alexander Gardner, who had only recently taken the last photo of the president, will now capture the conspirators on his photo plates. Lewis Powell, who had brutally attacked Secretary of State Seward, leaving him severely wounded. Edmund Spangler. During the assassination, he attended to Booth's horse in front of the theatre. George Atzerodt. He was supposed to kill the vice president, but backed out at the last minute. And Dr. Mudd, who was later able to convince the authorities that he had merely acted according to his Hippocratic oath. Six days after the assassination, a train is decorated in Washington. As many people as possible will be given the opportunity to pay their last respects to Abraham Lincoln. America has never seen anything like it. The train, christened the Lincoln Special, leaves Washington on a 1,700-mile journey. The coffin is laid out in the newly completed presidential carriage, in which Lincoln had not been able to travel during his lifetime. From Washington to New York to Chicago to Springfield. On the 12-day journey, the funeral train will stop in cities along the way before reaching Lincoln's hometown. Tens of thousands accompany the coffin as it is drawn by white horses to the train station in Washington. An honorary guard watches over the president on his final journey. The coffin is made out of walnut wood with heavy silver plating. The cost, $1,500. An ordinary coffin costs a mere $10. Lincoln's body has been embalmed with zinc chloride to preserve it on the long journey. The funeral train's first stop will be in Baltimore, only 36 miles from Washington. At every stop, the coffin is laid out in state. Along the way, hundreds of thousands will tearfully bid farewell to their aid. After another narrow escape, Booth and his accomplice are hiding deep in the woods by the Potomac River. Harold has turned to the bottle.
You're a drunken pig.
Booth has given up alcohol to keep his mind clear during the days ahead, but his leg is causing him terrible pain.
There in the bag.
His diary is his only comfort. John Wilkes Booth, star of the stage, believes he has rid the country of a tyrant.
Tonight I will try to escape these bloodhounds once more. I have too great a soul to die like a criminal. How she loved me, my Lucy, when I played romantic characters on the stage. Lucy. My dear Lucy. You alone understand what I have done.
At the White House, Tad Lincoln dearly misses his father. He has no one to share his pain with.
Mommy. Mommy.
Mary has retreated into her own spiritual world and lays tarot cards all day. Along the banks of the Potomac, the assassin's pursuers search for signs of a boat. The river is wide, too wide for the fugitives to cross by swimming. It appears that the assassin is still on the Maryland side of the river. Wherever the funeral train passes, onlookers pause to pay their respects. Many are moved to tears. 23 different engines will pull the funeral train to Springfield. Hundreds line the route to watch the train pass. In the cities, tens of thousands gather. The train is preceded by a so-called pilot locomotive. It announces the funeral train's arrival an hour in advance, so that people in the cities can be on time to meet it. On April 22nd, Booth's accomplice David Harold manages to exchange their horses for a boat.
Are you sure you can row?
Oh, yeah.
They will use it to cross the 3-mile-wide river. Harold has never rowed a boat before in his life. Swept along by the current, they encounter an unpleasant surprise in the early morning mist, nearly hitting the bow of a US Navy cannon boat. They row on unnoticed, but lose their bearings and end up on the same riverbank where they started. Only after a second attempt do they make it across to Virginia. They are now safe, or so they think. Harold heads off to round up a horse and cart.
Wait here. I'll go get a wagon. Hurry.
As they make their way deeper into Virginia, they discover that their accomplices have been arrested in Washington. The Lincoln Special approaches New York City. In the largest city in America, the financial metropolis of the New World, the funeral train has stirred up controversy. The city's mayor has forbidden the participation of blacks in the procession through the city. It's a slap in the face for the 5,000 black soldiers who fought for Lincoln during the war, and stark proof that racism is rife, even in the North. Though the 400,000 blacks living in the northern states may not be slaves, they still do not have the same civil rights as whites. A telegram from the War Secretary in Washington reprimands the New Yorkers. Blacks are allowed to join the procession after all. But only 300 are brave enough to do so. They fear being attacked by whites. 600,000 people gather in the wide avenues of New York. A window seat costs up to $100. People climb trees to get a better view of the coffin. Bars and theatres are closed. Lincoln's body is laid out in state. For 2 days, a steady stream of people moves past the president's coffin in New York. Photography is strictly forbidden. The only picture of the dead president in the open coffin is taken in secret. Photos of Lincoln lookalikes circulate. They are sold by the hundred. Reports reach Washington that Booth and Harold have been sighted. They have now been on the run for 9 days. They decide to take shelter in the shack of a freed slave. Booth is outraged.
This is it. Old Jim says we can stay here for a while.
This nigger shack is the best you could do. Put the weapons on the table over there.
He is still the boss. Harold, the failure.
Go and get some food. Go! Go. Go!
Booth cannot understand why his fellow Southerners have so suddenly changed their tune. More than anything else, Lincoln's death appears to have brought the nation together. Booth feels increasingly isolated. He has nowhere to turn for help.
After being hunted like a dog through swamps and woods, I have ended up here, in the depths of despair. And for what? To do that for which Brutus was once admired?
Back in Washington, Mary Surratt, who gave shelter to the conspirators as they hatched their plan, has been sentenced to death. Her daughter Annie begs the new president to show mercy. insisting that her mother is innocent.
Oh, Annie, I would come home. I would come home with you, Annie, but God has me here.
She claims that her mother was the victim of her own good heart.
Annie!
The military tribunal regards Lincoln's assassination as an act of war, a hostile attack by a group of rebels on the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. Hundreds of witnesses are interrogated. During the trial, the press have a field day, battling for readers with the latest stories and portraying the convicts as monsters. Yet the leader of the conspirators and Lincoln's assassin remains at large.
This is it. This is Garrett Farm. Over here.
They have reached a remote tobacco farm, Garrett's Farm. The owners do not realize the identity of who they have taken in. Booth's leg is now so badly inflamed that it should be amputated.
Garrett said we could sleep here. Lie down.
Harold intends to go out and find him a doctor.
Have a little bit of this.
The train's coming.
Day and night, the funeral train rolls through America. Buffalo, Cleveland, Detroit, and now Chicago. The city of Chicago wants to outdo New York. Hundreds of thousands gather. Never before in American history has a man been showered with so much glory, even if only after his death. Panic breaks out when thousands of people strain to touch the coffin as it is pulled through the streets. In Chicago, the coffin is opened one last time. The funeral director has applied thick layers of chalk and rouge to Lincoln's face. Instead of finding Booth a doctor, Harold has ended up in a brothel in Bowling Green. He boasts of having assassinated the Yankee president. The women are impressed and will later give him away. The next morning, Harold still hasn't returned.
My soul, my life, everything I own belongs to the South. For so long I have invested all my energy in fulfilling my goal. Now I have been so bitterly disappointed.
Booth decides to change his appearance to make it harder to recognize him.
I know that I don't have much time left, but I'm not going to make it easy for them. I can only walk on one leg, but I have the brain of 20 men. I, John Wilkes Booth, have earned my ticket to immortality.
Soldiers are on their way to Bowling Green. One of the fugitives has allegedly been sighted in a brothel. At the Washington Navy Yard prison, preparations are underway for a multiple execution. Carpenters are constructing the gallows from which the conspirators will be hung. It will be an historic event, carried out in front of the American press. Meanwhile, the soldiers have secretly followed Harold after being tipped off by the prostitutes. The dramatic chase has reached its grand finale.
Someone's here.
Come out! We know you're in there, Booth! Come out!
It's over. Who do you take me for? It doesn't matter anymore. It's over. No, it doesn't. Stay! You stay! It's over! Fine. Leave the rifle. Keep the damn rifle, coward. You're a coward.
I'm coming out! I'm unarmed!
Tonight, I will direct my own performance. Caesar is gone once and for all.
Come out! We'll give you 10 seconds more!
Brutus, your hour has come. New tyrants will make your greatness shine in a new splendor.
Torches! Fire the barn! Fire the barn! Come out!
I will not come out this evening!
Come on, get his legs! This way. Raise my hands. Useless. Useless. Dead.
John Wilkes Booth dies at the very same time of day as his victim did 11 days earlier.
7:22.
A cannon boat carries Booth's body to Washington. He is brought to an armoured naval vessel where an autopsy is performed. The sailors grow furious at the sight of him and throw his body overboard. It is later retrieved and buried in a storage room at the old penitentiary in Washington. His captured accomplice, David Harold, is jailed with the other conspirators at the military prison. He too is put on trial. His sentence is soon declared: death by hanging. After 1,700 miles and 12 days, the Lincoln Special is approaching its destination, Springfield, Illinois. An honor guard marches to Lincoln's private home. Lincoln's horse, Old Bob, is brought along to bid farewell to his master. Only Lincoln's wife, Mary, does not attend. Her suffering has driven her mad. A doctor has declared her unfit to return home for the funeral. Lincoln's old companions pose in front of the house for a parting photograph. It was 4 years earlier that the lawyer turned senator had left Springfield to become president. On May the 3rd, 1865, the Lincoln Special arrives in Springfield. A staggering 7 million people have come to view the martyred president on his final journey. It is the largest turnout ever for a funeral procession. At the state capitol in Springfield, where Lincoln gave his first great speeches, he is laid out one last time. He has come home. Under a portrait of George Washington, the coffin now rests, closed forever. One by one, his friends and colleagues say their last goodbyes. The 12-day journey has taken its toll on Lincoln's remains. They are no longer presentable. On May the 5th, 1865, Lincoln is buried next to his son Willie in the family tomb at Oak Ridge Cemetery. The only relatives present at the ceremony are his son Robert and his cousin John Hanks. After the heavy doors of the tomb are closed, guards are stationed to keep out the curious and to prevent vandalism by angry Southerners. In Washington, Mary Surratt's appeal to the new President Johnson has been denied. She knows that she will die today and prepares herself.
Madam, it's time to go now.
She will become the first woman in the history of the United States to be executed. At the old prison, everything is ready. Next to the gallows, graves have already been dug for the conspirators' bodies. The military tribunal reads out the sentences one last time. Photographer Alexander Gardner readies his camera. His photographs will be the first ever of an execution.
Soldier, do your duty. Yes, sir.
The four conspirators meet their agonizing deaths. Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, George Atzerodt, and David Herold. An image captured as a warning to all. At the cemetery in Springfield, an obelisk is erected in the memory of the assassinated president.
All right, now, Sergeant Corbett, you need to look the hero, okay? And stand just a little bit more like that. There you go, okay?
In Washington, Alexander Gardner is again at work in his studio.
A bit more. Mm-hmm. And here we go.
He is photographing a new hero, Boston Corbett, the soldier who shot John Wilkes Booth in the burning barn. Even months later, newspapers print picture stories of Booth at the tobacco farm and of the conspirators' execution. In the end, the actor would achieve the immortality he sought. His final performance would never be forgotten. The first assassination of a president in American history. Booth's diary disappears for a long time. When it is later found at the War Ministry, 18 pages are missing, leaving questions. Were some high-ranking figures involved in the murder? Was Booth the spearhead of a much larger conspiracy? Mary Lincoln would never overcome the death of her husband. When her son Tad dies of pneumonia, she is sent to a mental hospital and shut away. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. To those who admired him, he was known as the Liberator. Even today, his legacy is bright. In 1869, 4 years after his death, blacks are allowed to vote for the first time. In response, a secretive group of white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, emerges to spread terror among blacks throughout the South. It will be more than 100 years before Lincoln's dream of equal rights for all becomes a reality. In 1922, a memorial is erected in his honor in Washington. There he sits, carved from marble on a grand throne, a sacred place for all those who value freedom.
Our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every wreck. The price we sought is won. The port is near, the bells are here. The people all exulting. Why follow eyes? The steady